All right, guys. Thanks everybody for coming. This is a lightning talk. So basically, what lightning talks are, if you don't know and you've never been to one, it's a student-led talks where students will talk about technical topics that they've learned about throughout sort of their programming experience. So in this case, it's mostly alumni who are going to give us some awesome topics. So basically, everybody's going to give a short 7-minute talk. After the talk, if you have any questions, feel free to direct the questions at the particular people who are going to give the presentation, and they'll answer the questions for you. So basically, the order of the talks today is going to be John Zhao, Chris McIntyre, Diane McEaton, and Angel Jose. Van Eaton, I messed that up. I only had Diane down. So that's the order of the talks, and let's get this kicked off. So John, why don't you take over, and we can get started with the first talk.
Okay. Give me a second to share my screen. Okay, can everyone see this?
Yep.
Okay, great. So my topic is on dynamic programming, and soon you can find my website, johnconco.com. It's not up yet. It's really just a Mexican restaurant website right now. So this is hopefully one of a many-part technical series on algorithms and acing the technical interview. Okay, so the goals of this talk is to provide a very, very high-level explanation. So it's going to be a little bit rough, and so I'm favoring accessibility and intuition over academic precision. But this should pave the road for you to learn about all the different use cases and exceptions and nuances later on. Okay, so dynamic programming is used to answer the very simple question of, given a lot of ways to do something, what is the best way to do it? So here's a couple of examples. The first is the knapsack problem, which is we have a knapsack that can hold 8 pounds and items of various weights and values. What is the maximum value we can put into the knapsack? So the knapsack can hold 8 pounds, and you can only put a certain amount of items in here, and you have to choose which ones to increase the value in the knapsack. The second one is we have coins worth 1 cent, 2 cents, and 3 cents. How many ways are there to make 5 cents? And the third one is given 2 different strings, find the longest common subsequence. So for instance, ABCDAF and ACBCF. These are the letters, and so the longest common subsequence is 4. So what do these 3 questions have in common is that it's all about a lot of different ways to make 5 cents, to put things into a knapsack, and what's the best way. So you can think about dynamic programming as an algorithm that solves questions dealing with combinations or many different ways of doing something. So the knapsack problem. So again, you have these 4 different items of different weights and values, and how can you optimize what you're putting into the knapsack? So I've drawn it out in terms of just slots and squares. So we're trying to maximize what we put into these basically 8 slots. Okay, so step 1 for dynamic programming is to work backwards. You want to reason about the structure of the optimal solution. So imagine what the final result is. So we've tried to optimize everything that we're putting into the knapsack, and it could look a lot of different ways, right? So it could all be entirely filled. We put all the items in there that we can, and it perfectly fills up the 8 pounds in the knapsack. Or maybe, in these 2 cases, there were just some slots left over because the next most valuable item that we try to put in, it just doesn't fit. There's just not enough room in the knapsack. But either way, we can be sure about one thing, which is that an item is either in the final solution or it's not in the final solution. It's one or the other. It can't be both, right? So more specifically, if we were to just pick a specific item, so let's just say item 4. Item 4 is either in the final solution or it's not in the final solution. It's one or the other. I'm just using item 4 for this thought experiment. It doesn't matter which item you choose. So again, there are only 2 possibilities. Case 1, item 4 is in the optimal solution. So given this knapsack with a bunch of items in there, it's gray, so we don't know what's in there. But in this case, we say that item 4 is in the optimal solution. So it's taking up these 4 slots because this is what we're assuming for this case. Well, if that's true, then, okay, so there's also the second case, which is that item 4 is not in the optimal solution. So for instance, as an example, in here, item 4 it just doesn't fit into this space. There's just not enough room. So again, so for case 1, if we assume that it fits into these 4 slots, what happens is now we have a new question. What is the maximum value we can put into a knapsack which only holds 4 pounds? So if we optimize this with this item 4, what's the maximum value that goes into this space? So basically, we've reduced the problem into a lot smaller of a problem, which is how can you optimize 4 slots? So case 2, again, is that item 4 is not in the optimal solution. So in the second scenario, there's just not enough room. You can't put it in there. Well, then the new insight we gain is that the optimal value of an 8-pound knapsack is actually the same as a 5-pound capacity knapsack, because there's these 3 slots that we can't use it because we just can't fit the items in there. So the new subproblem is, what is the maximum value we can put into a knapsack which can hold 5 pounds? And again, this would be with the remaining 3 items. How can we optimize this space? But what we figured out is that you can actually decompose this problem. And the solution to the final problem of how do you use 4 items in 8 spaces is actually composed of solutions to smaller, simpler problems. And so it's kind of like recursive dynamic programming. But for dynamic programming, we actually go bottom up. So we build up all these individual cases into the final solution because it's just more efficient that way. Okay, so step 3 is to go bottom up. So you solve the base states or the 0th states and you build up to the final optimal solution. So for the 0th state is if we have 0 items and we have a knapsack that can hold 0 pounds, what's the maximum value we can put into a 0-pound capacity knapsack? And that's 0. And so we filled out the zeros through here, and the rest will make sense right now. Okay, so you just keep going through the table. So if we just have item 1, which has a value of 15 and weighs 1 pound, what's the maximum that we can put into a 1-pound knapsack? Well, it's 15. And same thing throughout here because we only have 1 item and we just put it into the knapsack. So now we have items 0, 1, and 2. And what's the maximum that we can put into a 1-pound knapsack? Well, it's still 15 because item 2 weighs 5 pounds. So we can't put it into a 1-pound knapsack. But if we go to a 6-pound knapsack, what's the maximum we can put in here? If we have items 0, 1, and 2, well, we can put item 2 in here because it weighs 5 pounds. And so we have 1 pound remaining in this knapsack. And then what we do is what's the optimal value we can put into a 1-pound knapsack? Well, we already solved it earlier on. It's 15 right here. So you keep going through like that. And so for a 4-pound capacity knapsack, what's the maximum we can put in here when we have items 0, 1, 2, and 3? Well, we put item 3 in here to begin with. And so we have 1 pound left over, and we just go up to the previous column right here. And 15 right here is the maximum value we can put into a 1-pound knapsack with items 0, 1, and 2. So again, it was kind of like the earlier subproblem. So we continue going through the graph, and we get to an 8-pound knapsack with items 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we put item 4 in here, and that leaves a remainder of 4. So what's the maximum value we can put into a 4-pound knapsack with items 0, 1, 2, and 3? Well, it's 24. So 24 plus 5 gives us 29. And so the final optimal value for items 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 is this plus this subproblem, which we already solved earlier on. And that's the lightning talk.
That was awesome, dude.
Thanks.
Super good. Sorry about that. I was muted. Does anybody have any questions for John?
Have you used this in actual real-world problem solving?
No, so this is just for me to prep for technical interviews. I just started that process, so it's been going through a lot of these different algorithms.
Yeah, I
Do you
have to,
see a situation where it would come in handy over something else that we've learned? A more rational way of going about it versus dynamic?
Yeah, so I actually did a talk on dynamic programming because I looked up a bunch of other algorithms too. And generally speaking, like some of the other ones are pretty intuitive. So dynamic programming you're not going to figure this out on the spot, this like method, but there's a lot of problems that you're going to see on a technical interview that you can't really solve any other way efficiently. Like you're going to get a lot of these questions and you either know it or you don't. And so those are going to be dynamic programming problems.
Cool.
yeah, I have to say that I've watched other videos on dynamic programming, and while I learned the method that you could use, because like you can just follow the method and populate the table, I've never really understood why you have to do that. It's just like kind of like magic, and it's like, here's how you get the answer. You did a really awesome job of explaining not only how, but also the why behind it. So that was really fascinating.
Thanks. I actually have I have 2 more slides that go over the change problem. Can I just like quickly show that too? So you guys have the answers in case you guys want to quickly do it yourself. Okay. So
Yeah, when you get these uploaded, just make sure you give me the whole slideshow. I'll put everything up for you too.
Cool. So the change problem, like it's the same idea. So if we have coins worth 1 cent, 2 cents, and 3 cents, how many ways are there to make 5 cents? So this would be the solution to the to the case with how many ways are there to make 5 cents. And so basically you go through the same reasoning, which is, okay, all the different ways to make coins with 1, 2, and 3. You can pretty much split it into 2 cases, ways of making coins that involve the number 3 and ways of making coins that don't involve the number 3. And so the algorithm then becomes the number of ways to make 5 with 1, 2, 3 is equal to the number of ways to make 2 with 1, 2, 3 plus the number of ways to make 5 with 1 and 2. So I'm not expecting you to get it right now because this would be like, if they give you this problem, they're probably going to give you like 30 minutes to an hour to solve it. But this would be the general algorithm, and this would be the Ruby code for it. Okay.
Very nice.
Super cool. Super fascinating. Thanks so much for giving the talk, John.
No problem.
Chris, you're up next. You want to jump in?
Sure. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to apologize right up front. I just got over a cold, which I mentioned at the beginning. So I got my voice back this morning, but if I sound a little strange or start coughing, I apologize. So I'm going to be talking about learning a second programming language now that you've already learned your first, and how to leverage the skills that you've already learned. Okay. All right, so know what works for you. I think it's really important to remember how you learned your first language. You kind of start off not knowing where to go in the beginning when you are learning your first language, but now that you've already taken that leap, you know how you learn best. Remember why you want to learn. Are you just looking for something to up your game a little bit? Are you really interested in this language? Keep that in mind so that you have a reason to learn. Next, you need to remember to let everything soak in. Even though you kind of start off and you're like, oh, okay, so I know what I'm doing. Or maybe it's very similar to a language you've already learned. You need to take time to process everything because the syntax can be very similar, but that can also kind of throw you off. So just take the time that you need and let that soak in, which kind of corresponds with my next point. Remember that you need to learn the basics, even if it seems like a review. There, like I said, the syntax, like I learned Ruby and then I jumped into Swift for iOS, and it seemed so similar. But then there was something little with the syntax that, oh, I can do that in Ruby, but I can't do that with Swift. So just go over the basics, no matter how long it takes, or if it seems like all review. Okay. Keep in mind that this stuff is hard. It was super hard the first time you learned a language, but your second language is going to be hard too, because there's always those differences that are going to trick you up, or maybe it's the things that are similar that kind of trip you up. So just remember that it's going to be hard for you, but you are smart because you already did this once. So keep in mind the things that I'm going to run down through here, and you'll be good to go. First, make that time commitment to code every day. That's super important, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes to look over code that you did yesterday and say, oh, I should have done it this way instead of that way, and make the little changes. Find a good reference. Cheat sheets are good. Just something that gives you the basics of whatever language you're learning at the time. And of course the docs. They can be daunting sometimes. I know iOS docs are a pain. It's not like Ruby. I don't know. There's just, Ruby docs are super easy to read, and you go to Apple's website and try to read through the docs, and it's like, what are they talking about? But so in the beginning, it's going to be really hard, but you want to keep going back to that and looking over it. Find a mentor or a group, because someone to talk to when you get stuck is super important. I learned that in Firehose. Just talking it out with somebody, even if they didn't have the answer for me, a lot of the times, you can go to them and say, this is what's going on, and talk it through, and then bam, the answer comes to you. So make sure you have someone that can mentor you. Find reputable tutorials. There is a lot of junk out there that can kind of lead you down the wrong path. So make sure that you're finding the right tutorials that, someone that has a blog up on WordPress may not be the best as someone that has a good blog up that's selling a lot of merchandise and you see their name everywhere. So keep that in mind. Another really important thing is to go back and solve challenges and algorithms that you've solved in your first language, because at least you know where you're going. And that can kind of give you a clue of how to solve it with your new language that you're trying to learn. And then allow yourself to get frustrated just a little bit. I guess the best thing is for you to sit there and kind of mull it over, have your rubber ducky sitting there or whatever you talk to, and talk it out and let yourself get frustrated just to the point where, you have to walk away. And then when you come back, you're going to be good to go and more determined to figure out the problem. All right. Next, build. So start out by building something small. Might not be very impressive, but once you get that first little app in, you'll be determined to move on to something more difficult. So something difficult can be something that's challenging to you, but maybe not someone else that's more experienced. But just keep moving up, get something a little more difficult each time that you start building your apps. And then build a passion project. That's really important. When I got the job in iOS, that is actually what I started. They said, okay, start building something that's important to you. Like, well, I have no idea. Just think of something that would mean something to you and start doing it. And pretty soon you'll have all kinds of ideas that you can work off of, and that'll help you to kind of keep going. Read and study. It's like you're back in high school, college, whatever you did. You want to immerse yourself in someone else's code, first of all. You get on GitHub or go to open source projects and find someone's code that's out there. Critique it. Look at it and say, yeah, I wouldn't have done it that way, or wow, that's pretty cool. I wouldn't have thought of doing it that way. So get in there and look at other people's code. Move out of your comfort zone and read about topics that you're not ready for necessarily, but you want to learn about. Listen to notable speakers on topics of interest. So if there's a topic that you're interested in, go find something on the internet that you can listen to while you're cooking or whatever. Attend conferences. There's tons of conferences for everything out there now. So if something comes to your city, hop into one and get the most out of it that you can. Okay. Okay. So you want to join in. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and don't be afraid to give answers. So I just last week posted my first response on Stack Overflow. I was super proud of myself because I've always been afraid to give the wrong answer. So just get in there and ask questions and give answers, and someone else is going to have a better answer than you, but at least you attempted. Then get involved, teach someone, and contribute to open source projects. That is the best way to learn, is to teach someone. Even at my job now, I am the most newbie in that at my job, and I've taught people things, and you wouldn't think that you were able to, but give it a shot. What's it going to hurt? And last, celebrate every little accomplishment. It's important to give yourself that little push and just say, yeah, I did that, and be proud of the work that you did. So that is all I have. Does anyone have questions?
Have you submitted anything to the App Store yet?
I have not.
No?
No.
Have you talked with the developers? I know a couple guys who have submitted stuff, and they say Apple's stuff is very stringent for what they allow in. Like, not even if it's malicious or anything like that, but if it's bad code practices and they make you do a bunch of revisions, if you have any old code that doesn't work anymore, they make you take it out.
Yeah.
I'm curious if it's still that case.
Yes, it absolutely is. I've actually been, since I started there, I've been on a project that's an internal project. So I'm building an app for our head salesperson. But everybody that I talk to, they're like, no, don't do it that way. Even though it's just an internal app, you have to get used to following Apple's guidelines. So they're very much like that.
Did you start learning Swift because of work, or was that the goal all along?
Well, so I interviewed for the Rails job at this at the company I'm with, and in my interview they said, "Well, would you be willing to learn iOS?" I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." So, yeah, they had already hired the Rails developer they wanted, but so I just kind of got thrown in.
What did you find the main differences? I guess what you ever struggled with the most, coming from finishing learning Ruby to now having to learn Swift?
It's not so much Swift that's different. I mean, between Ruby and Swift, there's a lot of similarities because it's object-oriented programming, and
okay.
But it's the iOS side of it. Everything is different. The design, how you code is just completely different. So,
So specifically for Swift and iOS, like with web development, there's frameworks that sort of do a lot of the work for you. Are there frameworks that you need to learn in Swift, or is it just you learn the APIs of the Apple and you just use them?
So there are some out there. It's not like you have gems so much that, but there are like CocoaPods, and there's frameworks out there that you can use. It's just not as much, I guess.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I like the talk. I'm actually going to take a stab at Elm, mainly because I want to learn a different, like something not object-oriented, right? Something more functional. But I can relate to a lot of the points that you touched on. Like you have to kind of go back to that early pain of learning something new.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is. But that was real cool. Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Cool. Any other questions for Chris? Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for the talk, Chris. It was really awesome, and it's cool to hear your perspective. I feel like it always is frustrating to learn something new, and at the same time, it's easier to do, but it has that frustration, and you have to get over it. So the perspective was awesome. Diane, you want to jump up next?
You bet. Of course, my dog just started to bark really loudly, so I apologize in advance. All right, let's get rid of all this. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. I am going to be talking about Docker, which is a container that you use either in place of or on top of a virtual machine. Just like John in the first one, I'm hoping this will be part of a 1 or 2 part series on Docker, because I was actually going to spin up the Docker environment on top of one of the Rails apps that we learn for Firehose, so that everyone can see how it works. What is Docker? It is open source technology that allows you to run, build, test, and deploy applications inside software containers. It allows you to package a piece of software in a standardized unit for software development containing everything the software needs to run, including the code, runtime, the system tools, and the library, and enables you to quickly, reliably, and consistently deploy applications regardless of the environment. Unlike when you first start with Firehose and you have to, when you walk through the steps to deploy the Vagrant environment, they're specific. It says, make sure you do this. If you don't, you're going to get some kind of an error. One of the things that Docker allows is for one person to set up the environment, and then it can be deployed to everyone else. So there wouldn't be the issue with worrying about getting it set up. Although you need to do that so you learn how to use Ruby. But once you do that, and Rails, once you do that, putting in a Docker container and images on top makes it really, really nice. Benefits of Docker. You can ship your software faster. Docker containers, it's about 7 times, and I'm sure this is just from Docker, faster than non-Docker users. It enables developers to ship isolated services as often as needed by eliminating the headaches of software dependencies. For example, sometimes when you run your bundler on Rails, it says, that something is out of date or whatever. You don't ever have to worry about anything being out of date. Each thing can be isolated, so you can, ship just a piece of it, and you don't have to worry that Ruby Gems is down or whatever. Improves developer productivity. It reduces the amount of time spent setting up new environments or troubleshooting the differences between environments. One of the issues when I did a Rails Rumble a few months ago with Chris, who just did the previous talk, was that she and the other girl and I didn't have the same computer setup. So we did finally go through Vagrant, but Sharon was running Linux and we were running Mac. So it was a little different setup, and Docker allows you to do Windows, Unix, Linux. If you just want to run full Unix, Linux, Windows, and Mac all at the same time. So it makes it really, really nice. Dockerized apps are seamlessly moved from local developments to production on numerous hosts. So I could move my stuff up to Heroku, to Amazon Web Services, to anything else that you want to throw your Docker environment up to. Standardized applications, oops, wrong way. Go this way. There we go. Standardized application operations, small containerized applications, again, make it easy to deploy. And if there are any issues, you can roll back. Additional benefits of Docker, like I said, cross-environment consistency, expands your development team painlessly. If you have a new person that comes on to your team, instead of having them spend 10 hours or their first day trying to get the app up and running, everybody can have it running on their workstation within just a couple of minutes in an automated, repeatable, and efficient manner. One thing that when you refactor all of your code on Firehose is they say don't repeat yourself. So this makes it so you do not have to repeat yourself. You can use whatever technology fits best. Since you can isolate an application in the Docker container, maybe maybe PHP is going to work with your program, or Perl or something besides Ruby. You don't actually have to have that on your machine. And even if you use the Vagrant that we set up from Firehose, you can pull a Docker environment in using a different software or different program, and you don't have to have it on your machine, so it doesn't take up any space. It's easy to learn. And you can experiment if you want to learn a different language, although I didn't see anything on Swift on there, but I wasn't looking, so I'll have to look for that later. Also, one of the issues that you have when you're working with groups is that business people have access to the environments, the development environments. Docker makes it so you can distribute the application to members of another team. They don't have to know how it's configured or how it's set up. They just have it, period. Makes it really nice when you're working in a group where not everyone are developers. All right, Docker includes, when you'll need to download this, the Docker engine, which is the container combined with the workflow for building your applications. And unlike the traditional virtual machine that takes up a lot of disk space, it's run on a thin layer on your host OS versus a traditional virtual machine. And then Docker Hub, just like GitHub, software as a system for sharing and managing your application stacks. Installation of the Docker, I'm going to do it on a Mac. It's pretty simple. You're going to go to the docker.io, download through, set it up just like anything else. You're going to actually want to make sure, I always take this off the help improve toolbox, collecting anonymous data, but that's just a personal thing. It ends up in your launch pad. So you have the quick start terminal on your launch pad, and you're going to open up the window. I'm actually going to show what this looks like really fast, if I can stop this. Here is the quick start terminal on my machine. I'm going to pull it up, and the Docker people, the whale is their symbol. So it says that just like Vagrant, where we go to the Vagrant terminal for Firehose, you click on the quick start, it brings it up right here. Then to verify the installation, you go out to there's only a couple commands, unlike GitHub or Git, where there are numerous commands. There are very few commands that you have to run on Docker. So I'm actually going to make sure that this is connected to Docker. Docker run hello world. There it is, confirmed that it's actually running. This gives you a hello message from Docker that the installation is working correctly, tells you everything is set up and ready to go. So it's a really simple install that you have on here. Let's go back to this. Verify the installation. And then the next thing you need to do is add the Docker Hub to your tool belt, just like you want to install with GitHub. It includes image repositories, automated builds, organizations, and it allows your Docker images to be added to your current workflows for GitHub and Bitbucket. Your Docker Hub account is basically setting it up just like Git. And then you connect it to your local machine much the same way that you would with GitHub. You're going to put in your username, your password, and your email that you set up your Docker Hub account with. And I just did a little bit of research. I haven't used Docker on top of the Vagrant yet. I just used it alone. But I wanted to see, since we use Vagrant with Firehose, why you would use Docker and Vagrant. So it simplifies development, making it fast and easy to spin up containers that are file system level snapshots of production. You're deploying the full snapshot at once. You don't have to worry about apt update packages or bundler updates from Ruby Gems, or worse, if Ruby Gems is actually down when you deploy. I actually had that happen when I was deploying to Heroku once. The Ruby Gems was down, and I got an error. Couldn't figure out what it was, and it was just that the site was down for a minute. Bottom line for Docker, what if you could develop your Rails app in isolation on your workstation without using chruby or RVM or changing Ruby versions was easy. You had everything you needed as a consultant or freelancer with 10 Rails projects isolated for each project without needing to waste precious SSD disk space. You could spin up Rails, Postgres, and Sidekick stack in about 3 seconds. You wanted to share your project on GitHub, and other developers only had to run a single command to get everything running in minutes. It took less than 50 milliseconds for your container to start running. Docker makes all of that possible. There's just some additional information on there. And then, like I said, next time we will have additional stuff that I talked to Colin about. I wanted to show you. This is actually what Docker Hub looks like. I just created a quick one using the same screen name that I used for my GitHub account with Firehose, showing the repository. And you can go onto your, this is actually my repository, and I can go look, type in Docker, pull my name and the name of the repository. I don't remember what I called it. My Docker whale. I hear you. And then, didn't come out there. I don't know where I put it. All right, well, since it got beeped again, I always get beeped. I will, next time we'll be able to show you how to pull from Docker Hub and put the Ruby on Rails application inside a Docker container. Does anybody have any questions?
So I have a question. What was the motivation that you had that sort of ultimately drove you to actually learn this technology? So, like my background, like I've watched a few YouTube videos. It looks pretty cool, but I haven't sort of gone through the process of actually Dockerizing anything, because like I feel like while the setup I have now isn't optimal, like it's good enough. So I guess what was the point that made you realize I need to learn Docker and it's worth the effort to do?
Well, actually, when we started working on the chess app, which for those of you that haven't finished Firehose, it's your one of the final projects that you do as a group, and being able to. I was thinking about having a team that wasn't all on the same in the same page and didn't have the same skill set, and wanting to be able to have it set up in just a few minutes instead of struggling with trying to get everything set up, being able to just say, here's the container, boom, go, and let's move on with getting the real programming out of the way and not just worrying about the setup. So that was the motivation behind starting to learn more and more about Docker.
So did you use it as a team, or did you only see the use case of it when working with other people, but you didn't convince them to use it?
Now, I only saw the use case, but by the time I really understood the benefits of it, we were already way into our chess app. Now, that one of my team members and I are actually, we've built something else, not in Rails, but in Ruby, and we are going to deploy that to Rails. And we thought maybe we would try using Docker with it so that we could just have something else to put in our tool belt, add to our resume, and say, hey, yeah, it's something else that I know how to use.
That's awesome. Super cool. Does anybody else have any questions for Diane?
I got a comment. We use Docker in production, and that was switching from before when we were just deploying with Capistrano and Puppet, I think. And it's a huge difference as far as how easy it is to deploy. There's some quirks, of course, like any technology, right? Like you have to do some things a little bit different than if you just had it straight on. But the benefits are huge. We had one of our machines go down, and then we had to switch for some reason. And it was the easiest thing. We just copied over our Docker file, everything, and Docker, well, for us, we're still on Docker Compose. So, well, actually, no. Yeah, Docker Compose up, and everything came back on. Whenever we need to add something new, we just add it to the YAML file, which is kind of like a configuration file, and it'll bring up that container with a completely different environment. If something goes wrong in one of those containers, destroy it and build it right back up, and you're back fresh. It's just really an awesome tool. It really is.
Really cool. Does anybody else have any questions or comments for Diane?
Yeah, I have another question. Dan, would you recommend, at what point would you recommend for somebody looking into this?
I might actually it would have been something cool to have at the beginning of even doing the Firehose project when we started this. I didn't understand all the stuff that was going on then that I do now. So maybe hindsight is 20/20, but so maybe you do need to go through it and understand how the virtual machine works, understand what Vagrant is before you begin using Docker. But I think you didn't, when you first start with Firehose, you don't actually know all of those things. You just say, here, do this, 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 and this. So it could be the same thing. Here, do this, 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 and this. And while you're going through it, then you begin to understand a little bit more of what it's doing, why you're in the YAML file, how you can just blow away one container and bring up another one quickly. So, you get a lot of stuff thrown at you the first couple of days, and you think your head's going to explode. But what's one more thing?
Your head's already exploded.
Exactly.
Just another thing, at least around here, it's kind of like the hotness in startups, right? Because it makes your DevOps that much easier. So if you can add that to your tool belt and your resume, it's just one other thing that's going to sound attractive while you're getting started, because it really simplifies the DevOps side of it. So a lot of startups are going that route.
Yeah, and like I said, I wanted to use one of the Firehose things so that every week we could see, a real case for using something. But I was telling Chris, it added 18 minutes to my talk, so that's why it has to be next time.
Cool, good stuff.
You continue. Thanks, Diane.
Cool. All right, so that was an awesome talk, and it makes me want to actually learn and use Docker instead of just the high-level sort of videos that I've seen on it, which are super cool. But next up, we have Angel. So, Angel, why don't you take it away? So, Angel volunteered last week to give a talk, so I don't even know what the topic is. So, I'm excited.
Let me start off by apologizing. Like, the level of quality of these talks has gone up so much that I kind of feel bad. But I volunteered and I'm already here, so might as well. So let me see if I can do this. Can y'all see my screen?
Yeah, we see the taco.
All right. So guess what my talk is about?
Of course. For everyone, I think Angel's Nomster app was a taco. What code for taco was a taco finding place.
Yep, it was.
Dive in.
So I will code for tacos. That's just my motto in life now. And I had, like Ken said, I had very little time to put this together. So I apologize in advance. But here's another picture of tacos. Let's talk about how awesome, and I crossed out the I am, you are, because Firehose people have been getting really awesome lately. And let's see, I'm buying some time here because I got to fill in 7 minutes. So taco night. And I got to fill in a little bit more time. And everyone thinks I love tacos just because I'm Mexican, and I do. So just that's sharing a little bit about me and my life and my daily routine. But we could talk about some code now. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Ruby and just kind of the things that we can do in Ruby. So, whoops, let me go back. All right. So if we go and we do a 1+1, and I hope you can still see my screen, and we do that in our terminal, what do you think we would get? And, feel free to participate, anyone. So 1+1 equals
2.
2. What? And this is where I insert my. What the hell happened there? So let's do a 1 plus 2. Let's try another one. 1 plus 3. And here's the cool thing, and why I messed up my addition in my Ruby. It's that when you start getting to know how Ruby works a little bit under the hood, then it just kind of opens your mind up to the fact that you can do so many things in Ruby, and it helps improve what you think is possible. So let me go back to this. So 1+1, we saw that it didn't give us 2. So how did we even get to that? What happened there? So we can start by figuring out what the class is. So if you open up your terminal and you just do like a 1.class, you'll see that it belongs to the fixed num class. And that kind of gives you a clue of what you can start doing. So for example, in this case, why was my 1+1 not working? Well, because I did some monkey patching. So I did this little thing. I edited my fixed num right in the terminal, and I redefined what the plus method was. And it takes in a say what variable, and then I'm pretty much just multiplying it. So all of a sudden, I ended up redefining what my plus is in Ruby, and therefore, going back to this, that's why my 1+1 is acting kind of crazy, because I gave it new instructions. I gave Ruby new instructions. So how can we figure out how Ruby is doing and what methods are available, what we can do with them? Well, let's take, whoops, wrong window. Let's take another example. Let me go over here, back to this one. Array. So if we have an array, if we just initialize a simple array, 4 numbers in there, and right in our terminal, and our terminal is awesome to learn about Ruby, and you just do an array.methods, you're going to notice something. And you'll notice that those brackets are a method. So what does that mean? That, let's see it in the terminal again. I like the terminal. So let me see if I have my array here already. Whoops, I don't yet. Okay, so we know that if I wanted to pull out the number in the index of 1, we would do something like that, right? But understanding that when I saw my array.methods and the brackets themselves are a method, then that kind of opens my eyes that there's more than one way to doing things. So how do we call a method in Ruby? We just do an array, and then we do a dot, and we can call a method and we can pass a value to it. And that works. That's the same as doing that. So then we can think about when we did our 1 + 1, what would be another way of writing this? So then if the plus is a method that I ended up rewriting, we know that 1, we call our method, and then we pass it an argument. And that should work. Pretty cool. So we probably wouldn't want to be, and not probably, you don't want to be rewriting class methods in Ruby. You don't want to be rewriting your Ruby class, your array class, or anything like that. But it does kind of open your eyes out to the fact that if you know that about Ruby, when you're working in an app or when you're using a gem and something isn't just quite what you need it to do, or you're trying to figure out why it's doing it one way, it gives you clues on how can you start investigating a little bit further. So you can always use that class method on whatever you're calling, and it'll tell you what the class of that is. You can also use the methods in IRB or pry. If you use pry, it's an awesome tool for doing things. And it teaches you a little bit more about what you want to do. All that's important. I mean, it's cool to learn more about Ruby. It's awesome that, for example, we're working through algorithms and all that. But I think the most important method is adding the human touch to any code you do. So let's try that out. Let's go ahead and do this. So let's take our 1, and what happens if we add humans to it? Almost as awesome as tacos now. So, is it a fake one? No, it's still our fixnum class. So if we've been following along, we kind of get an idea of how that is working. Why does 1 all of a sudden in the fixnum class have a way to add humans to it? Well, there you go. I was just kind of played with it a little bit before that. So right in the fixnum class, I added a method called add humans, and that's what it returns. So what does that mean? That Ruby is such a beautiful language because it's so open, but it's also a dangerous language because it lets you mess up a lot of things. So use it only for good. But it does let you explore, and that's the cool thing, that especially when you're learning Ruby, when you're learning to code, one of the most fun things and also one of the most valuable things you can do is just play with Ruby itself. A lot of times when I do a coding night online through Code Newbie, and we'll do exactly what I did right now. We'll just go ahead and open up the terminal and we'll ask a question, and someone will ask, well, what happens if we did that? And I just say, well, type it in the terminal, see what it does. So let's say we wanted to add the fixnum class again, and we just wanted to redefine plus to do nothing. Now we know it won't let me. A worst case scenario, let's say you mess something up, this is how you fix it. Boom, you're back to a fresh start. Now if I try my add humans, unfortunately, it's gone. But I didn't mess up Ruby, I didn't kill it. So that kind of is a little thing. Now, why do I bring the humans part out of that? Let me go back to my presentation here. Because, and we can insert some kind of sappy song here. We Are the Champions is the first thing that came to my mind. But you, the human, is what makes code awesome. Code, at least right now, does not really code itself very well. You know more code than 95% of the humans out there. That's a totally made up stat that I made right now just because I was in a rush. So through code, focus on telling the story of the human, which is you. Sprinkle some code in there. Know what your strengths are and share them. For example, my strength is not in algorithms. I am totally in awe of the first talk, and that's why I was feeling so bad about this talk and the level of complexity. But I know that's not my strength. My strength is, in sharing tacos and, talking to other people and hanging out with people online, and share that, be visible. I do a lot of that through locally, through meetups and things like that, and also online. And through that come opportunities, and people will start noticing what you do, and people that feel the same way you do about whatever you're passionate about will start noticing. And that's very important when you're getting started, because you probably don't have the experience to back up a lot of these things. So a lot of it will be in what you're sharing, whether it's online, whether it's in blog posts, whether it's in the community, little exercises like the one I did right now. If you put it online in a blog post just to kind of explain how things are working, it's perfect. It's something that other people get benefit from. Have fun and eat more tacos. And that is my presentation.
Amazing presentation, Angel. So, a big question: where do you suggest people go to get tacos? What's your favorite taco joint?
Oh, you built an app for it already, right?
I built an app for it. People got to start contributing to that, man. Depends on where you are, but wherever you are, I promise you, I will find delicious tacos. So,
I think we should all take a Firehose road trip to LA.
boom, done.
Tacos.
Actually, if you do, I promise I'll take you to eat tacos somewhere good.
Perfect. I'll probably be out there this summer. So.
Nice, nice.
Everyone's hungry now.
I know. Sorry about that. I'm hungry. That's why I was thinking of tacos.
Amazing
Awesome.
talking, Joel. One thing I might point out is while Ruby is awesome at the ability to do this, like defining methods on other classes, it also can make it a little bit challenging to know where stuff is coming from. Things like sometimes you can call .blank ? And sometimes you can't, depending on if you're in Rails or not. And the fact of the matter is that it's sort of this monkey patched stuff that sort of makes it difficult. But it also makes your life really easy. So there's sort of trade-offs with all of that stuff, but it's really a fascinating topic and a fascinating trick that you kind of showed us.
Yeah, and mainly it's just so, not that I would be monkey patching things left and right. Mainly it's something that's helped out in just not being so afraid of Ruby. Like when you see, oh, that's why it works that way, then it kind of removes that barrier of magic, which is good, but then it kind of opens up your eyes that you can do so much if you just learn a little bit of how it works under the hood.
Absolutely. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, so I have a question. We actually do a lot of monkey patching, but we call it extensions in Swift. So like on the projects that I'm on, we'll add an extension to the font. So UI font, and then you add whatever you want to that class, and then you can use that as, you know, your preferred font or default font or whatever. So have you seen that this is helpful in any applications in Ruby?
Yeah, definitely. I think you just, you don't call it monkey patching. I mean, you know when you're monkey patching something, but I get the concept that you're talking about, kind of like when maybe you have a module, and then you're bringing that module and you're including it or extending it into a class. And now you have the methods of that module available to you. So it's the same kind of concept. It's just, you're probably not going to ever be editing the actual Ruby methods. You're working, I'm thinking maybe like you have a certain module that you don't need all the time, and all of a sudden you're writing a class that requires it. Then you want some of those methods. Like we have some modules around formatting phone numbers and sending, formatting different messages that we have. So we don't want that all over the place, but when we need it, we just bring that module in and we're good to go.
Right. And that was an awesome talk. Tacos and everything, just to clear that up.
Thank you.
Awesome stuff. Anybody else? Any other questions or comments for Angel?
Your stat's probably pretty close too, by the way.
What was that?
Your stat, you're only 5% of people know how to code. It's roughly 350 million people, so I think it's pretty close.
Oh, thanks for fact checking for me.
Yeah.
I totally
I had to do the numbers. I was curious.
Cool. Good stuff. Well, thanks so much, Angel, for giving that awesome talk. I think you made everybody hungry, but it still was a super, super good talk. We had a ton of good talks this time. So thanks to all of the speakers for taking the time out of their day to present. And for everybody else, a plug for the next lightning talk. You too can give a lightning talk. So if you want to give one, talk to me or Colin. And once we find it seems like we have some people who want to give duplicate talk. They're not duplicate talks, follow-on talks. So it seems like we're probably closer than at least the previous one to the next one. So reach out if you want to be involved in the next talks, and we'll definitely get you involved. But yeah, thanks so much for coming.
What's the URL again for the app where we can put talk ideas and upload and see what's coming up? There we go. Thank you very much, Colin.
I'm thinking probably the 3rd of March would probably work, so a month from today.
Cool.
That'll give enough time for everybody to get prepared and figure out schedules, stuff like that. So
cool. So let's say it's a soft date, but it also might change if we don't get enough signups. So if you want lightning talks to happen, be part of the community and give a talk.
Yeah, and if you just have something you want to hear about, not necessarily want to give a talk, I'm always looking for more people to add topics to the list of available talks, or if you want to give a talk but have no idea what to give a talk on, there is a list of available topics.
Very quick for Brett, who asked if anyone knows the comedian Gabriel Iglesias. I don't know if you can see this from here. That's the Gabriel Iglesias hoodie.
And for all of you fire hosers out there that aren't alums like all of us that are talking now, you can see that this is a really great community to be a part of because they just can't seem to get rid of us, right, Angel?
Yeah, no, yeah.
Colin?
They can't. And they just messed up by opening Slack and inviting me because now I could just DM anyone anytime I want.
Yeah, it might be a mistake for us to have access for in perpetuity.
I think it's the other way around. You guys can't get rid of us, but I'll take it.
Just take it, Marco.
Exactly.
Cool.
Awesome. Yeah. So the other thing that I wanted to say, the scheduling the Firehose Lightning Talks, that the link that Colin just shared, that's also an open source project that everyone can get involved in. There's probably some tickets up that can be improved, and Colin can probably help you with that too. So if you want to do some open source work, you can probably get to the GitHub. There you go.
There's also the community page.
The community as well, where we put our the videos and the recordings and everything as blog posts and video posts. So you can get involved in that as well and make that better and go to the open tickets. And I think the information on how to do both is either there, or Colin can help you with that because he's the master of all these open source projects.
Yeah, so here's the link for the GitHub pages. So yeah, if there are open tickets, if there's anything that you see on the sites that you think would be better, you can always open up your own ticket and have at her.
Awesome.
Cool. Good stuff. Well, thanks everybody for coming. It was super fun, and we're looking forward to the next ones. Yeah, get in touch if you want to give a talk.
And thumbs up, everyone, and we'll see you next time around.
See you later,
It was
guys.
fun. Bye.
Bye, guys. Thanks so much for all the good talks.